Well, g'day guys. Good to see you. Anyway, this week's Thought for the Week is sponsored by Luke Jameson. Some of you may not know, I have, as you can see, there are whiteboards in the background, and I write ideas up on my whiteboards. And Luke, you've been trying to get me to blog on various different ideas. Many of them I just wipe off the board and ignore. But you wrote one up this week, and it was, is Turkey in Europe or Asia? And I'm pretty sure you're just trying to be funny, but what was really interesting was I did my morning reading just the other day, and something jumped out at me. I'm reading through at the moment the story of Joseph, and Joseph is this guy who has some dreams. He believes his brothers are going to bow down to him. His brothers don't really like that and pack him off to Egypt, where he gets put into slavery. And then a woman tries to tempt him into bed, and he won't have any of that. And he gets thrown into jail for a number of years, many years. And then he finally is able to interpret a dream for Pharaoh, and he becomes basically second in charge of all of Egypt. And he basically gets them through a crisis. And it's in this period of his life where things are going pretty well, and he gets to marry one of the daughters of one of the priests, and he has two children, and one of those children's name is Ephraim. And he names him that because he says, God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. So I'm not going to talk about the land of Turkey, but I am going to talk about the land of suffering. On Sunday, a couple Sundays ago, we had a sermon about being in a valley. And in that valley is usually where battle lines are drawn. And both armies like to try to take the high sides. And then often the battle happens somewhere in the bottom. And we talked about, meeting Goliath in the valley, and as that sermon was focused in on battles and Goliaths in our life. But Joseph's story is about suffering. Now, here's a guy who knew suffering. Like, think about his story. Think about his story. He starts off life pretty good. He was probably the favorite son of his dad, and he has this great dream where all his brothers are going to bow down, and he's going to be this great ruler, and it looks pretty good. And don't we all start out like that? But then reality of life hits home, and I always thought perhaps Joseph could have some discernment in that he had this great dream, but perhaps he shouldn't have told his brothers. He should have kept that one under his hat, because his brothers get a bit jealous. But isn't that the way? I come from Australia, and Steve Irwin is a good example of somebody who was absolutely hated until he died. And once he died, everyone went, oh, top bloke, fantastic bloke, did these amazing things. But nobody liked him when he was alive because he was so successful. And don't we look at people who are doing well, who have big visions from God, who are stepping out and achieving great things for the kingdom, and we think, perhaps just a little bit, I wish I was like them, or I wish God was giving me a message, I wish God was using me like that. And instead of lashing out at perhaps where we're at, perhaps we're stuck with a Goliath in front of us and we don't trust God enough to step out and take it on, we lash out at the people around us. And certainly Joseph was in favor, and his brothers certainly lashed out, and they were going to kill him. But one of the brothers convinces them not to, and they sell him into slavery. I've never been a slave apart from a slave to Jesus Christ, but Jesus Christ's slavery is about freedom, so it's an amazing thing. So I've never been an actual slave. I can't imagine it's very nice. I can't imagine that you're treated very well. And so he's sold into slavery. But then a woman comes, a married woman, and tries to convince him to sleep. And in fact, not just any woman, the wife of the person who owns him. That's dangerous. And so he does the right thing, but she lies and she gets him thrown in jail, basically. Says that he tried to rape her. So now he is basically a charged rapist in prison. Not a good place. And I can't imagine a prison in Egypt in Joseph's time was a cakewalk. I mean, I know now you get internet, you get 3 square meals a day. In fact, some actually call prison a country club. I don't think it was like that for Joseph. In fact, I think it was pretty rough. And again, he rises in the ranks in jail. And then he finally becomes like the second in charge. So he knew suffering, but he still refers to, even in that time of favor, he is still in the land of Egypt, and he's still in the land of his suffering. But notice what he says about it. God made me fruitful in that time. So question: are you fruitful in the land of your suffering? Because I'm going to tell you, life throws things at us. We make mistakes and we go through hurts and pains and suffering. We do. Everyone does. And it seems to me that it's a tendency of our world to just wallow in our suffering. When hard things come our way, when the Goliaths stand up, it seems to me it's so much easier to just stay frightened in the camp than step up and take Goliath on. It seems to me when we're suffering, it's so much easier to blame everyone around us. And hey, let's face it, Joseph probably could have, because it wasn't really his doing that gets him to Egypt. It wasn't really his doing that gets him into jail. It's not really, he's just a guy, sort of, and it's almost like we're watching the story where he's just being thrust along from one bad thing to the next, just pushed forward, one bad thing to the next. Do we feel like that sometimes? We're just getting pushed. We feel like the whole world around us is just driving us in all sorts of different directions, and it's kind of like this. Do we feel like that sometimes? I'm sure we do. But see, Joseph, and I'm not quite up to this bit in the story, but Joseph, I know, has this meeting with his brothers, and he has this, he gets them back. He's pretty nasty, actually. he takes them to task, and then at the end of all of that, his brothers like go, "Oh my gosh, you're alive! You're amazing! It's fantastic to see you." And then, of course, they're remorseful. "We're so sorry." And Joseph looks at him, and he doesn't actually, in one respect, he sort of says, "What you did to me, you did to harm me." So he doesn't really say, "Oh, it's okay, you're forgiven." He says, "No, you tried to harm me. And you used what you did to harm me, but God used it for good. And we are now able to rescue Israel." And that's probably Israel, small I, his father, not necessarily Israel, big I, the nation of Israel, because the nation of Israel hasn't become yet. Because it's the 12 sons, the 12 ones that he's actually directly talking to right there, who become the 12 tribes. Well, I mean, I know it's Joseph's son. Ephraim becomes a tribe in Judah, in Israel. So not Judah, Judah is one of the other tribes. Ephraim becomes. And so Ephraim, meaning God made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. Are you looking for fruit in your land? Are you looking for what God is doing, not what the world is doing? That person tried to hurt me. Are you looking for what God is doing through that? Are you looking for the fruitfulness of God in your life? Are you looking that fruitfulness, like that, oh my gosh, there's an army coming against us? Are you going to be fruitful in that with God? Notice he says, God has made me fruitful. Not him. It wasn't anything he did. God did it. So are you looking for God's fruitfulness in your life? Are you looking for that change, that presence of God with you? And God didn't, by the way, God didn't just reach down and grab him out of that circumstance. He didn't go, okay, yeah, you're in Egypt, you're a slave, you're in prison, you're a slave, he didn't reach down and just wrench him out of there, because he had a purpose for him in Egypt. And things weren't going well, really, for Joseph. Let's face it. But God used all that stuff that was going wrong for good. Are you looking to be fruitful wherever you're at? Are you looking to grow in your bad experiences? Or are you just flopping on the couch and going, why me? And don't feel like I'm judging you, by the way, because that's a classic for me as well. I get despondent. I get a massive tub of Ben & Jerry's and sit on the couch and I munch away on my Ben & Jerry's to, and go, why me? Why is this happening to me? But are we looking for God? Are we reaching out for him? Are we looking for him to make fruit out of the driest places? Because he can. Because my God is the God of the turnaround. My God is the God who slays giants. My God is the only God who can overcome the natural. Because in the natural, David would never have slayed Goliath. In the natural, Joseph would never have become second in command of Egypt. Are you looking to God? Are you seeking him? It's just my thought for this week. How are you doing in the land of your suffering? Are you fruitful? Or are you just kind of wallowing? Think about it this week. Have a great week, guys.